Let's turn back to the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. Deputy Director of the National Economic Council, Bharat Ramamurti, spoke earlier about the fallout in an interview, saying, quote, the Treasury Department is monitoring Silicon Valley Bank very carefully. He joins us now to shed a little bit more light on what that monitoring looks like. Thank you so much for being with us, clearly from the White House. Can you just give us a sense of how concerned the administration is about this episode and what it may signal about the health of the U.S. economy more broadly?
Well, Secretary Yellen, I know just a few hours ago, convened the leading regulators in this space, including the FDIC, to have a conversation about this. She issued a statement recently just saying that she had full confidence in our regulators to handle this situation. We're monitoring the situation carefully out of the Treasury Department and the relevant regulators. And so at this point, that's basically all I can say on that topic. We're monitoring it carefully, and the Secretary has full confidence in our ability to handle this.
At least in part here, some of the worry here is about the impact that rates are having on the economy, on the banking system, and the clients that they're exposed to. What is the White House watching most closely when it comes to the stresses that might be caused as a result of the higher rates?
Well, look, obviously the Fed's higher rates cause all sorts of economic implications. We're not really going to comment directly on what the Fed has done or should do. We believe strongly in the independence of the Fed. What we have been doing at the White House for over a year now has been focused on using whatever tools we can to help the Fed do its job, bring costs down, bring inflation down. We signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law last year. That's going to cause significant reductions in costs on everything from prescription drugs to energy costs for American families. And that's going to help the Fed along its way. And I should note that in addition to that, we obviously got good news in the jobs report today that despite those higher rates, we're continuing to see very strong hiring and good opportunities for workers.
You know, while we have you as well, you're talking about the impact of inflation here. The White House budget is already out for next year as well, the proposal. And I'm wondering what you think about any criticisms that there would be about inflationary impacts about the spending.
Well, the top line of the budget is that we're making investments, as you note, in all sorts of things that are important for American households, childcare, paid leave, cheaper housing opportunities. But all of that and more is paid for with revenue. In fact, over the 10-year period, the deficit would come down by $3 trillion under the president's proposed budget. And that's going to help on the inflationary side as well. So what we think we've put forward here is a reasonable proposal, down the middle of proposal, with some investments in American jobs and American competitiveness and innovation, and offsetting increases in taxes on those at the very top of the chain, nobody under $400,000, and on the very largest corporations.
Well, you've emphasized a few times now this administration's focus on job creation and a healthy labor market, which was evidenced once again by the jobs report we got today. In theory, though, in order to truly rein in demand and bring down the inflation that the American consumer and citizen is facing, you are going to need to see some softness emerging in the labor market. Can you just give us a sense of the kind of unemployment this administration would be willing to tolerate should it be necessary to rein in inflation?
I think that there are multiple theories on how to bring inflation under control. What we have been glad to see over the last several months is that inflation has been declining at the headline level for 7 straight months. We are hopeful that that is a trajectory that's going to continue over the next several months, even though we anticipate that it won't be linear. There'll be bumps along the way. And again, our job is to make the Fed's job as easy as possible. And we're doing that through the Inflation Reduction Act and through some of the other proposals that we're implementing, including the infrastructure law that will help reduce energy prices. So, look, the president is a strong believer in a strong labor market. He said over and over again that a labor market where employers are competing for workers rather than the other way around is the kind of economy he wants to build, and we're not backing off of that.
Well, a lot of the initiatives you're referencing, including the Inflation Reduction Act, are longer-term investments being made in the U.S. economy, but that may not necessarily help the inflation fight in the immediate term when we are talking about a Federal Reserve getting set to raise rates once again this month. So what are the more immediate moves that this administration can take? Are any in the works currently?
Well, certain aspects of the Inflation Reduction Act have already taken effect and are already having a positive effect, at least on the costs that families have to pay. There's a cap on insulin prices. There's a cap on the amount that seniors can pay for prescription drugs out of pocket. All of that has gone into effect as of January 1st of this year. the deficit reduction impact of the Inflation Reduction Act already is taking place. The deficit came down by $1.4 trillion last year, and the Inflation Reduction Act is going to contribute another several $100 billion of deficit reduction over the next several years. So while it's the case that some of these elements are going to take a little bit longer to come online, some of them are already taking effect and having the effect of bringing down inflationary pressure and also reducing costs for families directly.
You know, one of the noticeable things in the labor report today was this idea of wages starting to roll over. Inflation is still sticky. How worried are you about that standard of living problem that many Americans may face with a decoupling here? Is that a concern that you may seek to address?
If you look at the data, what we've seen over the last 7 months is that in each of those 7 months, real wages have gone up. In other words, wage growth has been higher than the rate of inflation. And that's been particularly the case for folks at the lower and middle end of the income spectrum, which we're glad to see. So some good information there on real wages. Going forward, of course, we hope that those dynamics continue. And I think with the kind of labor market that we're seeing now, where we're creating hundreds of thousands of new jobs each month, there's some good indications that that kind of wage growth can continue at the same time as the ongoing inflation moderation continues.